favorite weekly guests, Super Bowl champion Coach Brian Billick, BYU football tight end alumnus. Coach, welcome back to the show. First and foremost, how was Thanksgiving?
It was awesome. It was great. We had a great to get together with some family members, and were able to watch a good deal of football like everybody else. Good weekend for football.
Absolutely, it was a great weekend for football, and it's funny that you bring that up because BYU, they won their last game of the season against Hawaii by 10 points, but then the jubilation didn't last very long because we find out Monday morning that Ty Detmer is relieved of his offensive coordinator duties, and now we're all asking a lot of questions. What was your reaction to finding out that Detmer was out as the OC for BYU?
Well, this is, a predictable pattern, whether it's in college ball. We'll see this coming up, obviously, in the NFL. Get through the season. We're already seeing some coordinators let go and changed, which is typical through the NFL season. You don't see, obviously, that much in the college game. But in the NFL, and then, what they refer to unaffectionately as Black Monday and Tuesday in the NFL, that's when you see usually the head coaching changes, which will be the first week in January this year. So, this is the time the teams have to reevaluate where they're at and decide what direction they want to go with their coaching staffs.
What's it like as a head coach to let someone go?
That's hard. It really is, because first off, you're dealing with someone, you're having to make a change with someone that obviously you respect, someone that's been very close to you in terms of that you've gone through the baptism of fire that is, competitive athletics, and a member of your family, basically. But then you have to do what you have to do as a head coach. You have to think about the collective good of your organization. Jim Fossil was one of the best friends I had in football. Had come to work for me as offensive coordinator in Baltimore, and I had to make a change. It was very difficult during the season. That is very, very difficult to do. But having said that, you have an obligation to the organization. You make the changes that you think you have to make and go forward.
It's a little awkward with Ty Detmer being the guy in this situation because emotionally there's a strong connection with the fan base between him. I've said I think you need to disconnect Ty the player from Ty the coach. What's your reaction to this, given that it's Ty Detmer?
Yeah, that is tough. That adds another element to it. I mean, anytime someone's been a storied part of the program, and certainly Ty has been that, and you have to separate them because that doesn't give you a free pass going forward. There is an emotional attachment to it, and will continue to be very highly thought of and loved by BYU and alumni. But Coach Taki has to look at the structure of what he's doing. That made that a difficult decision, I'm sure, but underscores the fact that he had conviction in doing what he did because he probably did get a little political heat for letting someone of the popularity and the affection that BYU Nation has for Ty Detmer.
How much of it is, hey, BYU had to play 4 different quarterbacks and 8 different running backs and use 5 different tight ends in a pro set or a pro style offense? Where do you put the wheel of accountability when it comes to whose fault it was on offense?
Yeah, well, and you see that anytime you're going through changes like this. Let's look in the NFL and the New York Giants right now. Benching Eli Manning, 2-time Super Bowl MVP Eli Manning. You talk about an emotional connection and a fan favorite. But obviously, to do that, what are they saying? What are they trying to portray it as? Okay, we need to look at Geno Smith. We need to look at Davis Webb. We need to get to January and know what we need to address, a.k.a. do they take one of these upcoming quarterbacks in what looks good to be a good quarterback draft year? That's a difficult thing to do because particularly with the player, the caliber of Eli Manning, that's going to continue to play. But this is an organizational decision. It is all about what is it we need to do to go forward. Now, Eli Manning is not the biggest problem the New York Giants have. One of the hardest things to do is to separate the play of a quarterback from what's going on around him, or evaluate a coach when you look at, as you just laid out, the litany of injuries and the changes and that many quarterbacks. I mean, you could start the season if you say, they're going to go through 4 quarterbacks. With any team in the NCAA, you could pretty much guess, this team's probably going to have a tough time with it. So that has to be factored all into the equation. Not to make an excuse. It's interesting. When I was doing games for Fox, I'd sit and coach as one of a team that's struggling, and maybe due to a lot of injuries. the first thing the coach says was, we'll sit down and say, well, we're not going to use injury as an excuse. Then he'd spend the next 45 minutes telling you how beat up they were and how many players they've had to go through. Because it goes part and parcel with obviously how good you're going to be. This is really more about, okay, that was what it was, but now what are we doing going forward? Coach Satake has to look at what kind of structure do I want, what changes need to be made so that we can wrap the players around the best structure we can going forward. And he obviously felt a change was needed.
It's certainly the head coach's preference, I would imagine, but walk me through this process. So Kalani Sitake has been begging the offense to be aggressive all year, and there was this kind of disconnect, it felt, between what he wanted and what we saw on the field. That resulted in a 4-9 season. But being the head coach and then you bring in a new OC, how much of that is I'm hiring someone who I know will run the offense I want versus, hey, OC, you just get us points and do it however you deem best? How does that dynamic work?
Well, you walk that balance. Certainly, you want to, give the latitude. Whoever you hire, and that coordinator coming in is going to know, okay, who's in charge here? Who's going to call the plays? You don't want to micromanage, and every coach wants to have the authority to say, okay, I can only do what I think is best. But that doesn't mean, as a head coach, that you can't lay out very specific parameters. More likely, rather than a dictate of I want you to do this or that, you're going to now hire someone that agrees with you in terms of the style and the character of the offense that you want. Now, we just went through a litany of injuries. Sometimes that affects you. Obviously, there's been a number of times I've had teams where I want to do X, Y, or Z, but I just didn't have players to do it. So you have to do what highlights the player's abilities best, even if it's not what you really want to do offensively or defensively. But at its core, yeah, you got to bring someone in that is of like mind in terms of the style of offense or defense that you want to run.
Brian Billick, NFL Super Bowl champion coach, BYU football alumnus, with us on BYU Sports Nation. You can follow him on Twitter at Coach Billick. Great stuff there. When you are looking in this specific scenario, just say you are an analyst or a somebody that BYU is looking to give them advice on hiring a new offensive coordinator. What are you looking for in terms of characteristics?
Well, obviously, there's got to be a fundamental core experience that you look at to say, okay, this guy has had the prerequisite time in the profession, either as a player, coach. Then that comes in varying degrees. I've hired a number of former players to become coaches that obviously I thought had great upside in terms of becoming coaches, whether it be a Jack Del Rio, now a head coach with the Oakland Raiders, whether it was Mike Singletary, a Hall of Famer linebacker that had never coached before I hired in Baltimore, but you think they have the prerequisite background that you can then help mentor them into the coaching end of it, versus a coach that's been a career coach, gone the route of the GA and the assistant coach and worked their way up and has that prerequisite ability. And then it comes back to, okay, you got that, and that may or may not mean that they've been a coordinator before. Sometimes there are some really bright young coaches that you look at and say, you know what, this guy is a superstar in waiting. He just needs the opportunity. I mean, the guy that gave me my first coordinating job, Chuck Shelton at Utah State University. I had not been a coordinator to that point. He took a leap of faith with me, given my collective experiences, to say, yeah, I think this guy's going to be a good coordinator. I'm going to give him his first coordinating job. So it does mean it's somebody out there that has existing coordinator experience. You tend to lean that way because it's more of a comfort zone. Okay, I've seen this guy do the job. So once you get that prerequisite out of the way, then it's, okay, what is your philosophy? What do you believe in? How do you attack certain things? Now, within that, one of the things I look for is versatility, because we just talked about the injuries that and the litany of quarterbacks that BYU had to go through. Yeah, it's great to have a philosophy and say, yeah, this is what I believe in. I want to be aggressive. I'm going to be multiple. Here's my protection packages. Here's the way I attack downfield. Here's the multiplicity of my run game. But I want to also know that someone has the experience and the ability that, okay, if you don't have that guy, then how are you going to adapt? And I've seen that in many situations during the course of the season, or when all of a sudden the personality of your team. I had to adapt as a offensive coach that had a specific mentality about what it took to win in the National Football League. And then I go to Baltimore, and all of a sudden this unbelievable, once-in-a-generation defense comes together. I had to change my mentality of, okay, I've got to play to the strength of this team, which means if I'm going to be a little less aggressive, we're going to run the ball and we're not going to turn it over because we can win a whole bunch of 14-10, 17-10 games.
Yeah.
That took a bit of a stretch for me to do. So I'm looking for a coach that has a certain amount of versatility and flexibility in what he does.
Good advice. Who's the best team? Let's wrap with this. Who's the best NFL team right now?
Wow. Well, you know, anytime you don't say the Patriots, it's going to come back and bite you. They have a pedigree. So let's just put them in a different category. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are have the best talent in the National Football League. I don't know if they're the best team. Those NFC teams, I tell you what, Philadelphia is beginning with every game, and you got a lot. Minnesota looks pretty good. I like what's going on with the Rams, but Philadelphia has all the pieces in place to be a Super Bowl champion team right now.
Wow. All fans in Philadelphia rejoicing right now.
And we have one on our crew that's particularly excited.
Coach, great stuff. We appreciate the insight into a very difficult, complicated situation for BYU football. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good.
Brian Billick.